My next guest I had the privilege to sit down with is a multi-disciplinary artist and outspoken advocate. This episode has some really good stuff in it that we have never really talked about on Dem Bois Podcast before. And so we discussed his trans identity along with being autistic and the intersectionalities between the two, right? And how to navigate that. We also talked about family life and navigating being a parent of two small children and transitioning and how to raise children, right? And not necessarily like explicit advice on how to raise your own children, right? But advice on how to raise children aware of gender identity in a world that is always on the binary. And so we talked about having a family, and at the end, we even dropped some little Bible knowledge. And so, which was very unexpected, but it was well worth it to listen. So I hope that you enjoy.
Dem boys. Amplifying, transmitting, color voices, yeah, we here making noise, yeah. Visibility equals possibility, you know we them boys, yeah.
Welcome to Dem Bois Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his, and my next guest is a multidisciplinary artist and outspoken advocate. His practice focuses on freedom of play, of joy, of magic, of whimsy, of the mandate to know oneself. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, Sean.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you. I'm so happy for you to be here and so happy for folks to hear your story. And so I just want to start out by asking, where are you located?
Right now, I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I've never been there. How's the weather right now? Because I know we having a heat wave over here in the Bay Area.
It is actually sunny today. It's like a perfect autumn day. Cool in the morning, sunny in the middle, but not too sunny. I'm wearing long sleeves inside. I was going to say I'm an October baby. I'm not. I was born in May, but I love October. So that's why I moved to Pittsburgh for the autumn.
Oh, okay. That's nice. I'm a autumn or fall person too, because I just like wearing long sleeves and button ups. That's why I do it. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's the fashion, the looks.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about being cute is what it's about. And so
I agree.
Yeah. And so go ahead and introduce yourself for folks so that they know who you are, pronouns and so forth.
Sure. I am Schereéya. I also use Schereéya. I tell people Schereéya, Sheree, he, they. I'm embracing duality, I guess, or multiplicity. So I live in Pittsburgh, but I'm from the South. I grew up in North Carolina, Eastern North Carolina. And I have traveled and lived all over. Right now, I work in tech sales as my day job. Thank you. I have two little kids. That was one of them. Right now I work in tech sales as my day job. And I like to say day job because really I spend my time writing or performing or trying to come up with some new art thing, some way of mostly trying to make sense of the world through that expression. So that's me in a nutshell, if I could fit in a nutshell.
If we could fit in a nutshell, right? But we're multifaceted people, right? So it's just like that quick little elevator pitch of like, oh, I'm this, but like we are so many more things, right? And so I'm looking forward to diving into all the parts that make you who you are, and so I'm really excited. And so I want to ask you, like, how did that name Schereéya? How did that choose you?
You know what? This is I think it's a funny story. So Schereéya is my given name, but it is not my legal name. Sheree is my legal name. So I didn't learn that until I was like 16. I was trying to get my driver's license. And I was like, wait, what do you mean my birth certificate says Sheree? Like I've been saying Schereéya my whole life. Like, and so it was kind of like well, do I change it? Do I try to get it changed? What do I do? And it's like, no, I've been Schereéya my whole life. I'm gonna stick with it. That was like 15 years before my transition. And my name has always been like a big part of my identity, right? People misspelled it, they mispronounced it. But I've always loved it. I've always introduced myself as Schereéya, like a ray of sunshine. For 30 years, that's been my intro. And yeah, so I did have to come to a place of deciding, do I want to go by Schereéya or Rhea in college? Because I had always introduced myself as Rhea, short name. And it was the sense of like wanting to step, like not wanting to feel like I was too much for people, right? Like, and trying to decide how could I, like, I really had this crisis at 18. So fast forward to me transitioning, and literally 10 years later, I'd say I started at age 28 and being like, okay, yes, I'm shedding womanhood as much as I can. I'm shedding she, her pronouns. I'm shedding my hair. I'm shedding, all this stuff. Am I shedding my name? But that's my name. I don't know. Like I feel like my relationship with my name is a lot different than other trans people I've spoken with. But what was interesting is because I do work in tech sales, and I started the job I'm at right now. I've been here for 2 years. I started around the same time that I started testosterone. So I had this really cool opportunity to say like, hey, I'm not a woman. I use they them pronouns. I might be I might be changing. I'm trying to figure, So it was like kind of crazy, but I had, because I work in tech sales specifically, which is a particularly male dominated industry. And I think, when you work in companies, you know this as a Black person, as a Black man, like people look at your name when you apply for jobs and things like that. So I was like, you know what? I have this really cool opportunity where I don't have to jump through hoops. I don't have to, where I can use Sheree, this more gender neutral version, this more mass presenting name, as this like opportunity to engage differently with people at work specifically, which is how I started using both of them. So my parents chose this name. Like they were like, apparently there's a song involved. I don't know. I've never seen it spelled any other way, but it's part of why I use the one name Schereéya, as my artist name as well, even though I like Sheree. My friends call me that for sure. Um, but yeah, so I think it's an interesting story, right? That I kind of like had the option to use both without having to jump through too many hoops.
I love how you said that you love your name and your name is a part of who you are. And I think that's the one thing with transitioning. That's like the first thing, other than surgeries or whatever, or hormone replacement therapy, people want to disconnect from their birth names. And so how does that feel for you, even within, your gender journey of like, no, I want to keep this name. I'm owning this. How does that feel for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was always like, as a kid, I was always really obsessed with gender neutral names, like boys named Morgan, girls named Charlie, girls named Bobby. You know what I mean? Like I always thought that was like edgy and interesting as a kid. But I just never felt like, I had people who'd be like, oh, I hate my name. It's so boring. Ashley, I want to change it. Like I never felt like that, right? Like I have my name as my domain on email, on TikTok, on Instagram, as everything. Like if you Google Schereéya, I'm the only person who comes up. It was kind of like, am I gonna give that up for another name just because people don't associate with masculinity? Like it's not my fault people don't, that people don't know that as a boy name. Um, so I don't know. I guess it was just like an opportunity to be defiant, which I was gonna say I love to do, but I think I am. Like I was born this way. So sort of an opportunity to be like, well, it's not my fault that people can't see that and think boy. Um, and I don't know, I didn't really start transitioning until I had already had children, been married, graduated college. Like I had already lived this sort of full life of things. And it kind of feels nice to hold on to something. You know what I mean? Like it feels nice to be like, wow, I've shifted my wardrobe, changed my body, lost weight, all this stuff, all this stuff. But guess what? Like I'm Schereéya. I've always been Schereéya. I'm still Schereéya. So that, I don't know. It is interesting. I think it's an interesting perspective. One that I don't get to hear a lot, I think with my trans brothers and sisters, but it works for me.
I love that you found a way to make it work for you and to love it. And as I was listening to you speak, I'm thinking to myself, like, to be honest with you, we put so much emphasis on names, and all a name really is to distinguish one person from another. That's it.
Exactly.
how do I know somebody in the room is not talking to you when they talking to me? That's just by my name. But it could be anything, right? It could be a color, it could be
Mm-hmm.
a symbol, it could be whatever it is to tell us apart. So that you know when you directing the conversation to somebody, you're either talking to me or you, right? So it's like, why do
Exactly.
we hold so much value on a name
Mm-hmm.
for one, and
Mm-hmm.
if it's gender specific or not? Who cares, right?
Who cares?
Like,
Who cares? Like, who cares?
yeah.
Exactly. And so many names, which I think is so interesting, so many names that we use now as feminine names, 100 years ago were more masculine, or they're names that come from the same, gender neutral word anyway, or so it's like, why do we even do that? I love this idea of, what is a name anyway, but something to differentiate us, because it makes me think of that line from Romeo and Juliet, which is like, what's a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Because Romeo and Juliet was like like a big catalyst for my transition for me. Like I had the opportunity to play Romeo in this play while I was in grad school. And it was a very queer performance, and all the people in the cast were queer. And it was the first time I was like working closely with people who were using neo pronouns, a lot of they thems, some z's theirs, and so every day in rehearsal, I'd have to be like, hi, I'm Schereéya. My pronouns are. And by the end of the time, I was like, I'm kind of thinking about this. I don't know what, but like doing that work with Romeo and dealing with these texts, specifically this idea of what is a name?
The connection between the two, right? Is like, just like you said, like 100 years ago, men were wearing high heel shoes and wigs, right? And so now there's just an
Mm-hmm.
uproar if somebody has a little bit of a heel on their shoe. Like, there are worse things in the world to be
Exactly.
focusing on that people aren't focusing on, besides somebody's name,
Mm-hmm.
what restroom I'm using, and what shoes I'm wearing, how my hair looks, right? It's
Thank
just
you.
too much pressure on me. You know what I mean? And
It's
it's
too
too much
much.
pressure on you. It's like, just live your life. How much happier would we be as people as a whole? And we just minding our
As
own
a
goddamn
whole.
business.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
No, seriously.
Yeah. And
You
so
about to make me get on the soapbox.
really. And so I wanna ask you, so you mentioned transitioning, beginning your transition at 28. Am I correct? And
Mm-hmm.
so you've gone through life, right? And so you have children and marriage and all of
Mm-hmm.
these things. And so how and when did that idea of who you were start? Do you say, hey, you know what, I'm gonna begin this transition journey?
So the long version of this is I was a very non-binary child, very non-binary preteen, and honestly, very non-binary teen, right? Like it wasn't really until I reached like college and I was like, oh, I'm attracted to men and I want to be hooking up with men. That I was like, I had to like deeply engage with my gender, you know what I mean? And be like, oh, I guess I'm a woman. I should like, and I will say, like, for me, I started growing boobs when I was like 12 years old, like really, really early on. So before then, my friends were all boys. I always hung out with boys. I went with my dad everywhere. I had brothers. Like I was a boy's boy, rough and tumble. Don't ask me about the color pink. Like that was me, And then like one summer, I grew boobs. I came back to school, and my friends were all like, um, wait a minute, like you can't sit with us. We're talking about important boy things right now, and you're a girl. And it was like, really? I don't like, are you sure that's not what y'all were saying last year or the year before that or the year before? Like, it was a very jarring experience for me. So I think it was kind of like the opposite of like being like, oh, I have to try to figure out how to fit in with women. Like, that was high school for me. Like, I don't know how to talk to girls. I don't enjoy wearing makeup. I have these huge boobs that people say like are cute. So I guess I'll put them up. Like I like to be cute. Like you said, like that's the number one rule. Gotta be cute. People are gonna be looking. So that was sort of like, so it was sort of weird to have to like later deconstruct that and be like, oh, like what if I just be myself and it's not about dressing up the way people want to see me in public, or it's not about trying to fit in with the honestly the boys I wanted to hang out with and talk with. It was kind of like you have to be more girly to, to get their attention at this point. Otherwise they don't care. Like it's kind of a weird thing. So fast forward to being an adult. Um Fast forward to specifically being a pregnant adult living in England. That for me was the catalyst. It was like I had the opportunity to cut my hair because I was like, I have kids, I'm not dealing with this. So it was like big afro type of thing. Cut my hair. and lost a lot of weight so could start dressing the way I had wanted to when, previously couldn't, didn't have that access to that type of gender expression. And I think that's what really kicked off this experience of like, if I start doing what I want and not what I think I should do, what does that look like? The other thing that's really important to my gender journey was learning that I'm autistic, which all happened around the same time as well. And so part of that, like doing what I want to do, was like, what if I, dress to my sensory experiences? What if I don't force myself into outfits I don't like or that feel uncomfortable? What if I actually wear stuff that my body can breathe in or that I can move in or that, and so I like to, sometimes I like to tell people like really how I learned my that I was trans is I started unmasking my autism. And I was like, oh my God, did y'all know there was a boy under here? Like, because it was like really that experience. Like for me, it wasn't like turning into or, transitioning. It was kind of like taking off this mask or this persona I had put on for so long and being like, oh, I was always this person underneath.
With autism, how is the intersectionality between autism and your transness? How is that connected and how do you navigate that?
So I will plug a shout out here and say that in the autistic community, the percentage of people who are queer, so who identify as either gender or like sexually queer, is like 82% of autistic people, which is like over twice as much as in the neurotypical community. So they like that's just an important statistic I like to throw out there because if you know a person who's autistic, they're probably queer. If you know a person who is trans specifically, they really, really, really might be autistic. And I do actually a lot of autism advocacy and like speaking and talking about this, which is why I'm speaking about it more kind of globally instead of just to my own experience. Because I do know, and speaking to trans masculine people, I can speak to more specifically as well, the number of people who grew up as trans masculine with specifically like PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is like I call it bendy joints syndrome, but that's like a type of physical disability that usually is kind of invisible. Uh, and transness, those four things often all come together. Like I know so many people who check every single one of those boxes, and I'm like, somebody needs to get some research on this. Like we need people putting money into this. Not so like too many of us have this profile for us to not be getting hormone therapy in high school, which would have been saving us from very difficult periods and things like you know what I mean. Just anyway, that's my soapbox on transness and autism. Clinically, the intersectionalities there. Personally, for me, I would say that it turned out a lot of the social anxiety that I was feeling was less around like, will these people, like, will I be able to fit in with these people? It's the thing I think a lot of autistic people feel. For me, it was like, will these people know that I'm not doing a good job of being a girl? Like, will they notice that I don't have the same like thoughts or that I can't like I need to be a female robot to fit in? Like, so a lot of the social anxiety that I was feeling on a regular basis was something that I could fix. You know what I mean? It was something that I could like, oh, if I look at this problem in the face and not from the side, there's solutions here. And so that process of like kind of unmasking my gender made me realize that I could, accommodate other things, right? Like when things are too loud, I carry earplugs around now. I used to not have that tool available for me. Like things are too bright, I wear sunglasses everywhere. And like, this is a little bit of a joke, but for me, there's that intersectionality of like the disability of I wear sunglasses because when lights are too bright, I'm gonna have a meltdown. And I wear sunglasses inside because I'm a cool ass dude because trans people are really hot. Like, yes, there's overlaps, but it works. You know what I mean?
Hey, this is Sean Aaron. I'm the founder and executive director of Dem Bois Inc. I am also the host of Dem Bois Podcast. As you may know, Dem Bois provides financial assistance to trans men of color in order for them to obtain gender-affirming surgery. We have great news. We're currently looking for volunteers to help support our programs. Our programs include our gender affirming surgery grant program and also our personal care package program. We personally curate packages filled with personal hygiene items. Just to name a few, things like tissue, soap, towels, toothpaste, and toothbrushes. We mail them out to trans men of color across the country who may be in need of help caring for their personal hygiene needs. We are looking for volunteers to help raise funds to support our programs. Also, we're looking for someone locally to the Bay Area to help us put all of the care packages together. If our mission is something that resonates with you and you would like to help support our work, just let us know. You can send an email to hello@dembois.org. That is HELLO@DEMBOIS.org. And we will get back to you with further details. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the next episode. I think that's very interesting, that connection between autism and queerness. And unfortunately, and you throwing that out there, right, that there needs to be more research on this, but unfortunately, as Black and brown folks, as trans folks, as, you know, queer folks, we're just not studied and overall. And right. And we're talking about all types of issues, related to HIV, or related to just anything, disabilities,
maternity rate,
yes,
disability, exactly,
is mind blowing. But it's like, nobody cares about us. That's how I feel, right? If you don't care enough about the people in your community, and so it was gonna have to take one of us to study us, and that's just it, right?
Yes. And, exactly.
And to care enough to say, no, my folks we need to have some documentation on my folks. It's very important. I think that's very interesting, though, that connection. What is your ideal of it? What do you think is the reasoning behind it?
Okay. I think, having done only anecdotal conversations with living people, right? I haven't done a literature research review. I mean, you know, I tried. There's not a lot of literature. But I think that it's likely that there are observably closer to 5 sex types that appear in the human genome, as opposed to the 2 we're told, right? Like, either you have XY or XX. And of course, we know there's obviously intersex people who are born genetically with one, or like either or both of, I'm using both here, quotes, the binary of those sex features. I think that there's probably closer to 5 that we could like probably type out and predict would be occurring regularly. And it's probably more than that. But, like, you know, let's say for the sake of this imaginary research study, we start with 5. Like, if we try to say we're you know, looking at 1,000 kids and we watch them all, they all have access to, I don't know, the same level of sexual and gender studies available to them, and we just kind of watch how they naturally progress, we probably will see that, like, an expected number of them will come out as being trans masculine or trans feminine or non-binary, kind of on either side of that. And I think that we could probably predict, specifically, I'm thinking of these transmasc PCOS markers, right? I think we could probably predict, based on a couple of features, what we think that would go. And I think this because when I think about like creation, right? When I think about like flowers, obviously flowers don't just grow in 2 colors. They have additional genomes available to them. They, you know, it grows naturally, and they have these other options, right? It just seems ludicrous to me that in all the brilliance, right, and all the ultimate multitudinousness of creation, that there's only 2 sexes in the human body, especially when we see that visibly is not true. So that's my personal hypothesis. If I had $100,000 and a team of researchers behind me, that would be the hypothesis that we would like go in with.
I mean, and obviously as trans folks, right, we know the importance of studying us, but what is your idea of what is the importance of studying us and getting to know us?
You know what? I think like there's obviously the like scientific and medical reasons behind this, right? Like, what's interesting for me, I'll use an example. So I had top surgery about a year ago. And I had my top surgery at a like woman's, you know, cancer center, essentially. And so the surgeons here, like the office itself was not really great about pronouns and things like that. They were working on it, not that great. But the surgeons themselves, I guess because they had the interest in this research, they had put a lot more effort into thinking about like things like what kind of surgery do you want to have? Will you have nipple replacement? Will we be able to reconnect the nerves and get that feeling back and things like that? And for them, it was really a blessing and an opportunity to be able to work with trans people because you have a different they have like different access to what you can do in your research when it's not like specifically just, oh, this person has breast cancer, right? This life-saving breast cancer research puts some like limitations on what you can do, or it's a lot harder to do the reconnection of the nerves, is what they were telling me, versus like transmasculine person. This is not cancer. You don't have to worry about that. It's a different type of surgery, essentially. So that's like an example of the ways that thinking about and caring about trans research has a benefit to the broader body. And that's true everywhere, right? So that's the like medical scientific reason why I think that's useful. But on more of the social side, there's sort of like the same idea that like, this idea of we're not free until everyone's free, or boosting up the people at the bottom catches everybody. Sort of the same idea when it comes to thinking about like trans mental health care, trans physical care, trans body care, right? When we put the resources in to help the most vulnerable among us, everyone else benefits. And that's always true. So we should be looking at those people who sit sort of on the marginalized edges of the community, and trans people, even if they were fully accepted, right? Because there's just so few of us naturally occurring in humanity, are going to always kind of be on those edges, which means we need that extra care. Like we need that extra research. We need that extra compassion. But if we're getting it, everyone else benefits.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have nothing to say. Absolutely. But I do want to say
something I think about a lot.
Obviously, yeah, it came out very well. And I really appreciate you for sharing that. And I want to say congrats to you for having top surgery a year ago. That's amazing. And how are you feeling in your body now, 1 year later?
I think one of the things that I was nervous about, and that people post top surgery people that I speak to, the number one thing that they're nervous about is, what if I regret it, right? Like, oh, what if I wake up and I'm like, oh God, like, bro, I don't regret this shit at all. I cannot emphasize it enough. Every single day I'm like, oh my gosh, look at my chest. Like, look in the mirror, walking around. Like, I don't regret it at all. Like, I don't know how to like, that. I think to me, that's the part that's the most shocking as well, right? Like that's what everyone says. All the transmasculine people I've talked to, they all say that. I believe them. And I was like, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm a freak, and maybe it's a fluke. Maybe I'll be different. It wasn't different, man. It like I've been thinking about, not even writing poetry about, right, but thinking about the poetry that really holds the tension between this experience of the pain that you feel in recovery with the joy that you feel in recovery, and how you can imagine that joy pre-surgery, right? And be like, I really think I want to do this because I know how I feel right now. And the absence of this feeling is likely the presence of a better feeling. But without doing it, you can't know for sure. And I just can't like, yeah, I don't know. And a big thing for me actually was I always struggled with trying to have a good relationship with like exercise, with working out, with my body. I struggled. I had like, again, joint problems, various like physical, but like kind of invisible disabilities that weren't diagnosed growing up that made it hard for me to, all this stuff going on. But specifically the experience of being like, you know what, I've decided that I want top surgery. And I had C-sections in the past with both of my kids, and the recovery process from a C-section is really difficult. And so I knew like, okay, well, if I had had better ab core muscles before the C-section, that surgery might have gone better. So I have the opportunity to prep for this, right? Like for top surgery, I'll start working out. I'll put a little bit of effort into my chest, and I want to try to have some other background information, but I'm really into mindfulness and stuff. So I was like, I want to try to have a mindful connection with my body before I start the hormones. But now that I've figured out that we're here, I want to give this body, not give it a chance, but give it a nice going away party. So it was, so these are all the things kind of going through my mind, and that was like prepping for the surgery for me. So I actually got really into like weightlifting, which I always wanted to do, but my mom as a kid was like, "You'll look like a boy," and it's like, like that's anyway. So now I would say that the experience, I was a little worried that like after the top surgery, without that motivation, I wouldn't keep up the working out and with the recovery process. But honestly, there was kind of no hiccup, right? Like it's cool to be like, look at me lift and see my chest, right? Like there's no surprise fat in the way, right? Like watch me like jump rope, watch me run around, like watch me do all these things that I struggled to do since again, I was wearing C cups in the seventh grade. Like, so I thought it would be such a huge transition, no pun intended, because it was such a like, I'm like, I feel like my boobs are the first thing people noticed about me. Like they were the first thing people ever talked about. People have been making jokes about them since again middle school, like all this stuff. And I'm like, what if my whole personality's in my boobs? Like, what if they go away and people don't? But it turns out like all of my friends immediately, I hadn't even finished recovering, right? 2 or 3 weeks post surgery. They're like, you're walking differently, you stand more upright, we see this. And I've always been a performer, right? It's not like I was a shy person, but they're like, we see so much more of you coming through. We see all that. And I'm like, yeah, girl, that's what I was trying to tell y'all. That's why I needed to like, I'm glad we're all on the same page. So, I love it. I feel like I do, it's been about a year. I still feel like stiffness here and there, but the recovery process has been great, way faster than I was expecting. The healing process has been great. Like I spent some time this summer topless on the beach, like in the South. Like, dude, it was like, I'm terrified right now, but nobody's saying anything, and I don't want to put my shirt on, so we're gonna make it. So it's been crazy. I feel like it was very much it feels both like a turning point for my life and also very much a like nothing has changed. I'm just moving forward exactly the way I want it to be going point for my life.
Hearing you talk about it, I was just smiling a lot, like really hard, because you bring me so much joy hearing that, because all of those things, I transitioned, I began my transition 11 years ago, and we are in October actually. Oh, and it makes
Yeah.
October 1st makes 11 years that I had top surgery. And so, yeah,
Wow.
so just
Congratulations to
thank
you.
you. So just hearing you talk about that, I'm thinking is making me replay all those same feelings in my mind the moment
Hmm.
they were gone. And my
Hmm.
my chest leaving had nothing to do with my transition. I hated them since
Hmm.
the moment I started to grow them, and I was gonna chop them off anyway
Yes.
myself.
Exactly, exactly. And I tell people that all the time. Like, the only reason I had them for so long is because I knew I wanted to have kids. And my mom was this huge proponent of breastfeeding. So I just grew up like, I'm gonna have kids and breastfeed one day. And, you know, it worked out, I guess, in the end.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. So you are a parent of two children, you say, right? And
Hmm.
so how is that? How old are your children, if you don't mind?
My oldest will be 7 next month, and the youngest is 4.
Well, 7 and 4. And so
Hmm.
how has that transition been for you as a parent and having a family?
So my second pregnancy happened after Romeo and Juliet. And so after I knew I was having gender feels, but before I had been able to like take the space to deal with that. And I think that plus some other stuff that was going on, but specifically that kind of like feeling free in my body for the first time and then kind of feeling trapped in it again because I was pregnant and like, suddenly, the hormones, like all it was a lot. And I fell into a really deep depression. And it made me realize that I actually cannot afford to not live my best life. Like I cannot afford to be my healthiest self because my kids won't have a parent if that's the case. That's what I learned. So it became really necessary for me to spend a lot of time trying to sort through like what's going on here. I need to be able to talk to my partner about the fact that I'm not a woman. We just had a baby, like all this other stuff going on. And then crazy plot twist, right before I came out as trans, my partner came out as gay. So I had to kind of redo the whole thinking process again. Like, now, wait a minute. Am I just making this up because of this other situation? Or, so like all of that to say that the transition itself was kind of a long, drawn out thing while my kids were still pretty little. But I got to the point of being like, all right, I'm not using she, her pronouns at all, even if I haven't convinced myself yet to start T and use he, him. There was probably a good year between those two choices. Well, between me acknowledging to myself that I wanted to do that, and then probably another year before I actually started telling other people and then saying I was going to do it. Um, so it was a long drawn out process, which means that my oldest kid grew up actually, interestingly, calling me Rhea until he was like 1 or 2. He didn't start using mommy until he was about 2 years old. So calling me Rhea. He used mommy for maybe a year before I started, probably yes, and less actually before I was like, I'm using they, them. And so he switched pronouns, but still calls me mommy. Like to this day, they still both call me mommy. My youngest one has always pretty much known me as he, him. And it's funny because like we've tried to change the mommy name a few times and they keep being like, no, we like mommy, but they will not like they will not suffer incorrect pronouns. Like if someone else she heard, they're like, my mom's a boy. They're like, he, him, he, you know what I mean? So it's been interesting. It's been like it was a long process. It was a long kind of drawing out thing in terms of like the relationship with my partner, which has changed a lot. Not really as a result of my transition, but kind of in conjunction with it. And watching my kids really kind of question gender in a world that tells them that gender is binary, but their parents keep telling them it's not. And thankfully, they have like very queer aunties around them. We have queer friends. My mom, it took her a second, but she's figuring it out. She got on board. So everyone's. I'm honestly really blessed to have such a welcoming family and to have so many beautiful, wonderful experiences here. But it is interesting to watch my kids who, understand that a person can be a different gender than the gender they were born and have a lot of questions like, why don't you have a penis? Maybe it'll grow in one day, or like, like are you done with your surgery? Are your boobs coming back? Like all these kind of, and they're trying to like jive that with what they see on TV, right? And what they see at school and what they see when you go into the store and there's only pink and blue sides and all this other stuff. So it's been interesting. It's very much been a learning process. And I think because of my own like constant ingrained non-binariness, pregnancy was kind of weird to me because the first question people ask is, are you having a boy or a girl? Do you want a boy or a girl? Do you know if it's a boy or a girl? Did you find out boy or girl? In any country, in any language, like you can travel and people in other languages. Oh, is it a boy or a girl? Like, bro, I don't know. Why do you care? Do you want it like what will they like? What will they be interested in? What will they care about? Who will they be nice to? Like so many other questions you can ask about an upcoming baby. Then is it a boy or a girl? But that's the number one question people ask about. And so that got under my skin so much while I was pregnant that I started like bringing in books about gender. I was like talking about like, we're not doing this binary shit with our kids. We're not doing it. And so that really did like, I think create a lot of space for when my own transition to be like, oh, well, that explains why I cared so much. A, but B, had kind of already laid the groundwork for it to be possible for that to be that space in our house.
Are you still with your partner?
No. Yes and no. We technically still co-parent together, usually in the same space, but we're both single now.
Understood. And so how was it like navigating that space with your partner? I can imagine that it was possibly difficult. And if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine too. But how is that navigating just the dynamics of it all?
It was interesting because I told people that when I was in high school, I think, okay, I'm going to reel back because my partner and I met in college. So I'm going to reel back to being 18, which was, I had the opportunity to go to NYU or Washington and Lee. NYU, New York University. I was going to be in New York, be a DJ. Like I wanted to study recorded music, blah, 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 blah. And I just felt very overwhelmed by this idea of city life. And I wound up going to Washington and Lee, which is like this small, rural, liberal arts, conservative, white ass, racist ass university in the South, where I met my beloved, tall, black man of a husband, ex-husband, I guess, ex, anyway. Um, anyway, details to say that I like to, my friends and I have talked about this, and I'm like, if I moved to New York, I would have been a short king in 12 months, like inevitably, right? But because I moved to this place that was so focused on not just like everything within a colonial framework that you could experience. It was very 86% of students join a sorority or fraternity there. So I joined a sorority. It's all girl stuff all the time. It's sundresses, it's boots, it's, going on dates. It's all this very like girly life. And for me, it was like I fell in love with this man who liked women. So I'm a girl now, I guess. I'm doing girl shit. So it was really, really, really weird to get to a point of being like, actually, we've been having a lot of issues and we need to figure out if we're going to separate or not. But it turns out you're gay and you like men, and that's why we've been having so many issues because also I'm a man. But the transition I think took so long that at first it was like, well, is Schereéya non-binary? Is Schereéya a man? Is Schereéya trying to figure it out? Is Schereéya changing their pronouns every 3 weeks? Like, and I think that it just like it was weird to be able to embark on this journey of queerness together for my partner, who was actually a pretty conservative person who, like, early on in our relationship was like, I don't know if I can go to our gay friend's wedding because I don't know if I can support gay marriage because I'm a Christian. Like that level of, to a place where it's like, no, we go to Pride together now, baby. Like we take our kids to Pride, even though that's, we're not romantically involved. But it still was kind of like a long process of trying to explain and discover and find ways to press my new identity but still be safe because like he didn't know all the terms. He's not a gender scholar. He wasn't figuring it all out at the same rate that I was, or even at the same rate that I felt like he should be, right? So journey is the right word, right? Long meandering kind of thing, but it's interesting now at this point. It's been like 4 years or so of like gender stuff specifically. And we met this person at a party a couple of weeks ago that I thought, so this person is early transition, non-binary kind of person. And I thought, not that this matters for people at home, but for the illustrative purposes of this statement, I thought that this person was a trans femme person who had recently started estrogen and was like coming into herself. And my ex-partner was like, no, that's a trans boy. Like, that's a trans mass person. You need to get your shit together. And like, right, neither of us knew this person. He just has started putting in the work on his own to be like, I have trans friends, my kid's parents is trans, blah, blah, blah. And so, and he was totally right. Again, it didn't matter. Like, this person is living their non-binary truth. It doesn't matter one way or the other. But the fact that like has at this point put enough effort and work in that he's like clocking people correctly. I'm like, okay, swerve, gender king. Like, you did your research. So, it was rocky. It was rocky in the beginning. But we out here, and in some ways it's nice, right? Like to be like, oh, I'm one of the boys, right? Like we talk about gay shit. We have been to the baths together, things like stuff where it's like, it's cool if I have a gay male, like a cis male friend I can do stuff with.
I love that. It always seems rocky in the beginning, but I'm glad you are able to work that out. And now you are able to coexist and co-parent. That's very important. Hey, this is Sean Aaron, the host of Dem Bois Podcast. Are you enjoying the podcast so far? Great. I'm glad that you are. Would you consider donating today to help support the continuation of this podcast? As you know, this podcast aims to serve as a platform to highlight and amplify the voices of trans men of color and share our transition stories. The podcast not only aims to amplify trans men of color voices, but it also raises awareness around our lived experiences. You would like to donate? Where can you donate? Great. I'm glad that you asked. Link in our description will take you directly to Network for Good, whom we've partnered with in order to collect donations for the podcast. Or you can visit our website. On the website, click the donate button, and from there, you are able to donate directly to the podcast. All donations are tax deductible. What does the donations go to? Oh, I'm glad that you asked. Your donation will help to support our production costs. We are working with Jasmine from Pink Lady Productions that brings you this awesome content. And also, we pay our guests an honorarium. Pay our guests an honorarium. Yes, we do. Why? Because as trans men of color, we would like to support and uplift each other and honor the time that's given out to come here and share their stories. So if you love this podcast, share and donate. See you on the next episode. Take care. And I wanna ask you, because having two young children, people think it's impossible, right? And oh, you shouldn't have these conversations with your children because you listen, people this frustrates me because people say, "Oh, you're ruining children," but you realize that older gay or queer adults were once children, right? So, I mean,
Exactly.
yeah. So, as a parent of young children, how did you start that conversation? Like, how do you, if you were to
Mm.
tell another parent listening that wants to transition or that is thinking about it but needs to have a conversation with their younger children, what would you say, or like, how did you go about that?
I'm having a lot of meandering thoughts. I'm trying to streamline them in a row. One of these thoughts is I'm a sci-fi writer. I like to think of the world the way I want it to be, not the way it is, which means that when I came out to my family, I was like, hey, family, I'm using he, him pronouns now. I've decided to start testosterone because it's good for my mental and physical health. Thank you. And that was it. There's no asking. There's no, do you understand? There's no, can you, blah, blah, blah. Because I would like to live in a world where that's all that it takes. Will there be some blowback? Maybe. I was an adult, right? Like I didn't live in my parents' house. I was able to make that choice that way. Same thing with like, I think for us, because we had started kind of before I started transitioning, mindfully thinking about how we talk about gender in our house already. My kid had an entry point, even as a 3 or 4 year old, right? Like we read little books. This we read books to our kids every night, or did until they got, we're all busy and old now. But the point is, one of the books, for example, um, the little engine that could, right? Repetition. Kids' books are all about repetition. It has this part where it's like, and the little, if they can't get the engine, then they can't get over the mountain, and then all the little boys and girls over the mountain won't be able to get their treats. When I read this book, I say all the little boys and girls and non-binary kids, right? Like when you read those little board books that are all like opposites, they'll be like old man, old woman. And then I'll look at them and I'll be like, hey, they forgot the old non binary person. They forgot the old grandparent. They forgot, like, I will start pointing out these inconsistencies in the literature that we have in our house, even just the children's books, because I want my kids to know that even though it doesn't look like there are trans people or non-binary people in the world, they exist. And so we check out books like that exist as well. Like not, it's not just always their mom making up that's when they read stories. There's books like that exist. That's how I learned about the world is through books. So that's been my like biggest entry point to try to lay that groundwork. That said, it did take a lot of being like, hey kids, I'm using he him now. Like mommy's not a she. Mommy's mommy's using that. And if they ask questions, I just try to answer them honestly. And that's, it's still learning, but it's like they're people. They're people who live in the world. They have brains. They process the stuff they see. Like you can't just shape their world to be exactly the way you want it to be, but you can give them the information they need to move around in the world the way you hope they will.
Do you ever feel like you'll get to a point where you will not like them to call you mom? I know I had a previous guest before, and their children were adults,
Mm-hmm.
teenagers and young adults, and their children, they wanted their children to still call them mom because that's who they were to their children, right? And so, do you ever
Mm-hmm.
think you'll get to a point in your journey where you're like, maybe mom doesn't fit, or maybe you don't even know yet, but is there space for that or not?
So there's definitely space for it. I have been trying to get them to kind of switch it, but all the reasons that I want them to switch it are reasons of fear, right? They're like, when I'm at the beach with my kids wearing swim trunks, hoping people are not staring at my top surgery scars, and they're like, mommy, 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 suddenly I'm panicked. They're not panicked. They're fine. The other people around, they might be curious or confused, but most of those people aren't paying attention or listening anyway. And so, it's a thing that I kind of wrestle with internally because I'm like, I do feel like it, it, I I call myself the mothering parent, right? Like my own pregnancy and birthing experience was crazy. And I'm like, there are some things that you really only got to experience if you were a Black woman in America. And almost dying in childbirth, that's a Black woman in America thing. Unfortunately, like, you know what I mean? So I often feel like I can't actually be separated from motherhood. And I don't want to be. And I don't really mind being called mommy, right? I don't feel like I need to be daddy or father in those ways, right? We've been trying to, you know, Harry or Baba or, kind of middle of the range parent names. But again, for me, it's like, it's not my fault that people don't know that boys can be moms. Like back to the name thing, right? So it is something that I kind of go back and forth on. I don't push it super hard. I've tried to explain a little bit about why I don't love it when they're calling me mommy. But I think they also feel like they have a right to a mommy. You know what I mean? I think the kids are like, kids get a mom and a dad. We have a mom and a dad. Yeah, that's what it is. So, it's in flux is the short answer.
So what would be like your advice for parents listening who want to transition that have young children but aren't really ready to make that step because of the children? What would you say to them?
I would say it's okay to be trans with your friends and not at home for a little bit. Like, get friends, try them on, see where it feels safe and where it works and where it doesn't work. Eventually, right, you start feeling too uncomfortable in the I'm gonna say the fraud in the patina, I guess. You start feeling too uncomfortable and you're like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. And then it bursts out. Um, but also find transparent friends. Like, it's one thing to have trans friends. One of the things I really struggled with when I first started coming out, though, is all the trans people I was meeting in the city were like 24, like 24-year-old twinks. They can't understand my parent problems. So find transparents, like they exist, they out there, they're older, they've been, trans longer. Um, and it makes it possible to see that, like, you can do it. You know what I mean? And again, the thing that like helps me out in times of like mental crisis, which I think, all trans people are familiar with, especially pre-transition trans people, the special type of anguish that goes on in the brain there. The thing that like keeps me, I guess, sure-footed is again thinking about like the world that I want to live in, right? The world that I want my kids to say it's possible to live in. My kids don't feel anxiety about calling me mommy in public because they have no trouble meshing trans mommy. So I really try not to push my own anxiety about it, on them. And I think it's sort of the same idea with like trying to figure out how you come out or how you transition. Our kids have so much more space and grace available to them than most of the adults, all of the adults probably that So even trying to talk to them on the terms they can understand, like, hey, I was born this way. Everybody told me this is how I say it. Like everybody said I was a girl, and that wasn't true. Like I happen to be born with the parts, and I try to keep it as scientifically gender neutral as possible, right? Like people who have uteruses, people who have vulvas, people who have vagina. Like I try to use those words, and I'll say like you might hear, or mostly women, or usually those people are women, but sometimes they're not. I try to use those words from the get. Again, you heard my kids are young, and they can understand that, and kids can, right? Like kids have the space. They're little sponges. They will soak up whatever you put into them. So being really intentional about it, even when you're like, I still got to figure this out on my own inside, like I got to go wrestle with it. Like give them, pour into them what you want them to squeeze out.
That's well said. And give kids more credit, right? Kids, just so you're saying, kids they are a sponge and they can take in. I mean, be careful what you give your kids, right? You don't want, that's how you make fucked up adults. But, definitely be careful with the information you give your kids, but have more grace with your children. I know when I first transitioned, my son is 27 now. And so when I came to him and I was nervous and I told him I wanted to transition, and he said, well, what is that? And I explained to him what it was. And then he was just like, let's do it. right? But that is
Oh,
because what? And he was a teenager. So and it's also because
yeah.
what, how he was raised, and you know, taking them around different types of people. So it's like, even if you're a parent and you want to transition, but you know, go around more queer people, right? Have
Yes.
friends that are queer. Don't do it alone.
See, that is really important. I was talking to someone the other day, and she's not queer. Well, you know, we have so many conversations about queerness that I keep being like, maybe. Anyway, she's not queer, and she's older, an older Black woman, like maybe in her, I think she said she just turned 40. And she was telling me about a friend she has who's gay, but he doesn't, she was like, he doesn't do any, kissing or partner stuff or whatever around his kids because in his mind, he's like, I don't want, if my kids grow up gay, I want it to be because they're gay, not because they felt like they had to because they saw me or this, that, or the other, blah, blah, blah. And that particular anecdote has really stuck with me because I'm like, sir, like the internal homophobia is showing, like your kids need to see that love. They should see that it's normal. They should see that, like, you know, it's not perverse or something that should be hidden away or whatever. And I recognize like it's hard when you're trying to deal with that on your own and you still haven't figured out, like, will I go to hell? Will I this? Will I that? I don't want to worry about dragging my kids down with me. But it's like, you got to work that out. Like, you really got to work that out because your kids deserve to have the healthy version of you so they can be the healthy version of them. So, yeah, I don't, that made me itch. I was like, what do you mean he doesn't have his boyfriends around his kids at all?
That's kind of silly if you think about it, just on the grander scheme of things, right? Because if he wasn't a gay man and he was a straight man, you have your girls, your women around
Exactly.
your kids, and so would that make your kids straight just because they see you in a heterosexual relationship? Like, that makes no sense.
Exactly.
That's still, we forget,
Getting all kind of toxic ideas about what
right?
it's like to be in a
Right.
relationship.
We forget that children are people too. And one day they will
Yes.
be adults. And our job as parents is to raise them to be the best individuals that they can
Mm-hmm.
possibly be, and well rounded
Mm-hmm.
and all of those things. And then when they get to a certain age and they go off on their own, it's their life to live. But you want to give them a
Exactly.
good head start. And keeping stuff from, you know what, raising my kid, we didn't keep nothing from him. We talked about diseases. We talked about,
Mm-hmm.
STIs and all different things. We had all these conversations, right? Because the world is not going to filter nothing.
No,
The world
nothing.
filters zero.
Nothing at all. I'm always surprised at the stuff they come home. So I'm like, I thought we weren't gonna have to deal with this till middle school. Like, you're in kindergarten. What are they saying over there? So you really do have to be vigilant.
For sure, for sure. But you give your children a lot more grace than we are giving them, because they are going to be in charge of the world one day when we're not here. And so we want to have them be as
Exactly.
prepared as possible and to make this place a better place than we left it, right? And so,
Exactly.
yeah. And so this is the part of the show where I love to ask my guests a random question. And so I got a list of
Ooh.
questions that's growing and growing. I now have 47 questions. But what's different about this season is I want you to take one and then leave one. And so just pick a number between 1 and 47, and I'll read you that question. And then when you're finished with the question, leave a question for me and for future guests to answer.
Okay, I'm gonna pick number 43.
Ah, good question. Number 43 says, what are some of your passions?
Okay. I'm gonna answer this by talking about special interest as an autistic person. My passions and special interests are Venn diagram is a circle. Uh, I would say I'm passionate about a lot of things. People would say I'm a passionate person. Um, I love food. I'm really passionate about food, eating it, making it, growing it, picking it, sharing it, all of that. I love food, and yes, I'm not gonna info dump about food. I love food. I love reading and books, reading them, writing them, kind of anything to do with words, poetry, song lyrics, music. Hip hop is a subsidiary of that, is one of my passions and special interests. Like, I love rap music and hip hop. Um, I love traveling. I don't know. I think I'm passionate about humanity, like people, like as a thing. Like, do I want to go up and have a conversation with every stranger on the street? No, I like people from afar. but like as a concept, as like a being, a unified entity on this planet, I feel really passionately about that. I don't know. I could probably talk about a lot of things. I could probably rattle off a whole bunch of stuff. I think the stuff that I think about like deeply, and and then the stuff I don't care about at all.
So it's either like or don't, and that's it. No in
Yeah,
between.
yeah,
Okay, all right.
yeah.
I'm with you too. I always tell people this, and they like, "What you mean? You work with people? You like, social justice?" I always say I hate people, and I want to say why I say that, because I don't like human beings in the way that we are towards one another.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't, and that's what I don't like. I love people, but like you said, from afar, stay over there, and we could.
I love the potential
Yes.
that we have, and wait, this is funny. Sorry to all men who are about to catch the stray, but this is how I feel about men too, right? Where it's like men are trash. All men, I keep telling my friends, as nigga that started testosterone, I can't confirm it's all men. And I love men, like specifically black men. Like I love the potential, like, and I'm saying potential because obviously it's not all men, but like when you love a man who is a cool man or a good man or a good, like that is a special type of experience that you can't experience anywhere else. And I feel that's the way about people too, where it's like, as a whole, we're doing a number. We're doing a number on the planet. We're doing a number on each other for no reason. We're doing a number on ourselves. And that's, I guess, where the love comes in. Is I'm like, everybody is just a guy. It's just a girl. Like they're just trying to figure it out, and they don't have the resources they need. Yeah. And that's why they're acting like that.
That's exactly why they're acting out. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I have a bit of hope for humanity. I really do. I mean, people like, why? We are, we killing each other. Are we doing this? We doing that? No, I really do. I feel like, I don't know, maybe I won't be here to see it, but I feel like one day we get our shit together. Hopefully.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. And so I want to ask you to leave a question for a future guest to answer.
What's the question? I guess if I had to leave a question, it would be, tell me about a book that changed you. That's what I always want to hear about.
I got it down. So you did say earlier you love books and you were a reader. And so I love that.
I
love that. I know one that changed me was, I think it says Know Your Why. I think it is.
Oh, interesting.
Is that what it's called? Have you heard of that book?
I have. I don't know if that's the title, but I feel like this idea of your why.
It's something about a why, but I can't remember the title. But for folks listening, I'll put it into the show notes. But that was something that really changed my trajectory of thinking about just leaving my mark on this world and what it is that I want to do. And so that was mine. I shouldn't answer the question. That's for somebody else to answer. But since you mentioned it, right?
It's okay. No, yeah. I'm trying to think for real. I read so like I love to read. I have a cliche answer. Actually, the book that came to mind for me is the Bible, which I think is interesting because I don't go to church anymore. I don't consider myself Christian at all, but more for political reasons than for like ideological reasons, I guess. But I very distinctly remember like reading through specifically Jesus's words, like Old Testament words during college, because I was just struggling and being like, you know what? People do not read this book. Like people don't look at the words and see, because Jesus actually answers a lot of the questions, like a lot of it. And that was like I grew up in church. My parents were pastors, so I was familiar with the Bible, but like actively just being like, I'm not going to read all the extra stuff. I'm gonna just read Jesus's words. And that like had a really profound like effect on how I think of the world around me, actually. And that's how I got really more into mindfulness and Buddhism and like other wisdom books and other ways of like thinking. So, I don't normally say the Bible because it gets used so horribly so often, especially against queer people. But yeah.
So what if somebody listening to say, how do I know what Jesus said? How will they know?
Well, the easiest way is to get one of those Bibles that has Jesus's words in red, and you can skip to the New Testament, literally just read the red parts. I do highly recommend. Yeah, and my plug here is like, so many of the things that Jesus talks about in the New Testament are really like the things that they tell you about that you learn about in like therapy, right? Like cognitive behavior therapy, like learning that your thoughts are not you. And so you can have control over your thoughts. Like Jesus talks about stuff like that. Things around resting, things about like giving and volunteering, like just all this stuff that should just be like regular healthy people doing their things, which are I feel like not things that usually the church is talking about doing. Like no one's saying like, anyway, that's a different soapbox. That's another episode. You about to get
Yeah.
me going.
I really like you mentioning that though, because now I'm like, well, wait a minute, let me go find the Bible so I can. I never thought about it like that, but you listening to you say it, you are kind of right. I want to go see what Jesus said now myself.
Making noise, yeah. Visibility equals possibility. You know we them boys, yeah. Them boys, yeah. Amplifying, transmitting color voices. Yeah, we here making noise, yeah. Making noise, yeah. Them boys, yeah. We them boys, yeah.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. You have just finished listening to the 8th episode in a row. After every 8 episodes, Dem Bois Podcast takes a month-long break to relax, rejuvenate, and to prepare for the next batch of 8 episodes. So for listeners, this is a great time to go back and re-listen to episodes that you may love and enjoy. Also, it may be a good time to go back and listen to episodes that you may have missed. So also, during this break, be sure to like the podcast. Be sure to share the podcast out with folks in your networks. Also, if you like an episode or if there's an episode that interests you that maybe you have not listened to, if you click on the episode description, you will be able to find out more information about the guests who appeared on that episode. Also, you'll be able to click and to read the transcripts for each episode so you can follow verbatim every word that was said throughout the episode. To maybe you might want to reflect on something that was said or something that really resonated with you and you would like to not only listen to it but also read it. I hope that you like the show. I hope that you listen to more episodes coming up. We have new guests, new topics, new subjects, new everything. So I hope that you enjoy and see you on the next 8 episodes.